It turns out making great movies doesn't mean you're a great person. Judging by the behavior of these stars, cheating, animal cruelty, and outright abuse have historically all been par for the course in the film industry. In 2017, actor Anthony Rapp accused Kevin Spacey of sexually assaulting him in 1986. At the time, Rapp was 14 and Spacey was in his 20s. And while those accusations are bad enough, Spacey's response to them didn't exactly help his case in the court of public opinion. Rather than admitting to or denying the act, Spacey made a vague statement on X, writing, "I honestly do not remember the encounter. It would have been over 30 years ago. But if I did behave then as he describes, I owe him the sincerest apology for what would have been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior." Later in the same statement, Spacey also announced to the public that he was gay and had been romantically involved with men in the past. But if he hoped those claims might soften anyone's opinion of him, he was deeply wrong. As activist and columnist Dan Savage wrote on X, "Nope. There's no amount of drunk or closeted that excuses or explains away assaulting a 14-year-old child." Others accused him of trying to use discrimination against LGBTQ+ people to justify his alleged behavior, and that didn't go over well either. As Wanda Sykes tweeted, "You do not get to choose to hide under the rainbow. Kick rocks." And while his reputation was left in tatters, he was ultimately acquitted in 2022 by a New York jury. Following the verdict, Spacey said, "I've learned a lesson, which is never apologize for something you didn't do." Harvey Weinstein claimed to be a champion of feminist causes, but his behavior behind the scenes was outright predatory. The New York Times blew the lid off of Weinstein's actions through a series of interviews with A-list actors and former employees of his production company like Ashley Judd, Rose McGowan, and Asia Argento. They accused him of sexual harassment, offering jobs for sexual favors, and staging private meetings in his hotel room where he would undress in front of them. Before long, people also began presenting allegations of physical and sexual assaults.
I would have night terrors. I would sweat through to the mattress and inch down into the mattress. I would wake up screaming. This went on for years.
Even worse, higher-ups at his production company knew this was going on, but used monetary settlements and NDAs to ensure word never got out. The New Yorker reports he even employed ex-Israeli Mossad agents from a company called Black Cube to harass victims and record them without their knowledge. As Annabella Sciorra, one of Weinstein's victims, stated, "It scared me because I knew what it meant to be threatened by Harvey. I was in fear of him finding me." Weinstein initially denied the charges, but did admit to offering people roles in exchange for sex. Despite his claims, he was eventually convicted in both New York and California and was sentenced to a combined 39 years in prison. Alec Baldwin has had a strange few years, but his reputation as an entitled, erratic, and occasionally violent person goes back to long before the time he accidentally killed someone. In fact, Baldwin's ugly side often comes out when he's treated like any other regular person. For instance, Baldwin got into a pretty serious altercation on a 2011 American Airlines flight. Just like on every other commercial flight, a flight attendant asked him to put away his cell phone for takeoff. But instead of doing that, he threw a tantrum, locked himself in the bathroom, and was ultimately kicked off the flight. After the incident, Baldwin tried painting himself as the victim by attacking the flight attendant in a Huffington Post op-ed. He claimed that he felt singled out because other people were on their phones, then took aim at the flight attendant by writing, "The lesson I've learned is to keep my phone off when the 1950s gym teacher is on duty." And that's far from the last time Baldwin's petty behavior got the best of him. Mercury News alleged that he yelled at a server and called her a peasant at the Penn Gala in 2023, while Page 6 reports he was accused of punching a guy in the face over a parking spot in 2018.
You felt threatened? No, I just felt that what he did was impolite, bordering on dangerous.
And when he was arrested for biking against traffic, he berated the police for enforcing the law instead of admitting he broke it. John Wayne's name was synonymous with Westerns in the mid-20th century, but he spoke his mind about a lot more than movies in his 1971 interview with Playboy. For example, he stated that he did not approve of the civil rights movement and made some very broad and unkind generalizations about Black Americans. While he claimed to understand the Black community's resentment of the US government given the country's history of segregation and slavery, he also stated that he didn't think Black people should be given positions of power until they're, quote, educated to a point of responsibility. In fact, he literally uttered the words, "I believe in white supremacy." In another interview, he basically justified slavery by stating Black people enjoyed a higher standard of living in the US than they did anywhere else.
They live as well here as they live in any other country over that 199 years.
Then there was Vietnam. Wayne fervently supported the war despite it costing thousands of young American men their lives. Many people found this stance hypocritical, as Wayne himself never served a day in World War II. Instead, he worried more about maintaining his career and applied for deferment. At least in this case, Wayne received public backlash for his beliefs. Combat vets would jeer him at public appearances, and his wife told Military.com he adopted a strongly patriotic persona in an attempt to save his reputation. While you might describe some of the other people on this list as self-absorbed, irresponsible, or rude, the best word we have for 1930s Hollywood icon Wallace Beery might be sociopathic. In 1916, Beery married a 17-year-old Gloria Swanson in an on-the-fly wedding. When they couldn't find a judge to marry them, they went to a minister's house, interrupted his dinner, and had him marry them in their study. Despite the haphazard circumstances, Swanson felt she was living the dream at the time. As she wrote in her memoir, Swanson on Swanson, "When Wally put the ring on my finger, I remember my first real ring, which Daddy had given me when I was 7. As a child, I had turned the tiny pearl around into the palm of my hand and pretended I was married." But that excitement quickly disappeared, as that night, Beery assaulted her. Swanson quickly realized their marriage was a mistake, but concluded Beery would treat her better if they had children. But when she got pregnant, he gave her pills he said would help with morning sickness. Instead, she passed out and had lost the baby when she woke up. Still under the impression the pills were meant to help her, Swanson went to the druggist for a refill. It was there that she realized Beery had actually given her abortion drugs. She filed for divorce in 1917. Clint Eastwood reportedly had a very lax approach to his marital commitments. Speaking with Playboy about his first wife Maggie Johnson, he said, "Maggie is a woman who knows how much room I need." Well, whether she knew or not, he started cheating on her before they even got married. During their engagement, Eastwood actually got another woman pregnant in Seattle, though Johnson may not have found out about that particular affair, as Eastwood himself didn't know about the kid at the time. According to People, she was ultimately put up for adoption. Eastwood's second child was also born of an affair with stuntwoman Roxanne Tunis. Their daughter was born in 1964 while Eastwood was still married to Johnson. He and his wife didn't have a child of their own until 1968, 15 years after their wedding. They ultimately divorced in 1984, several years after Eastwood had begun another long-term affair with Sandra Locke. Since then, Eastwood has remarried several more times. Somehow, he stayed on good terms with many of the women he's been involved with, even the ones he cheated on. For example, his ex-wife Dina Eastwood had nothing but good things to say about him after their split.
He's probably the sweetest guy I've ever met.
You're lucky.
He is the sweetest. He's a loving, kind, low-key person.
But that's not the case across the board. During a 1989 palimony suit, Locke accused Eastwood of making her get 2 abortions and ordering her to get medically sterilized because he didn't want more children. Eastwood denied the allegations, which were eventually dropped in return for a settlement that included their house, $450,000, and a $1.5 million Warner Brothers development deal. While Eastwood always had something of a bad boy complex, it turns out even some of Hollywood's most upstanding actors had pretty similar habits. Superman George Reeves was largely considered a role model for America's children, standing for everything moral and right. But according to Dean Shapiro's essay, The Mysterious Death of Superman, that just wasn't the case. Shapiro wrote, Reeves' private off-screen persona was in many ways 180 degrees removed from the virtuous, morally upstanding character he portrayed on TV. In particular, Reeves had a soft spot for bold, older women. In 1951, he got involved with Toni Mannix, the wife of MGM producer and famed Hollywood fixer Eddie Mannix. Luckily for Reeves, Eddie was okay with it. He had a mistress of his own and kept the affair private for the benefit of everyone involved. After all, Reeves had a reputation to maintain, and it's not very heroic to sleep with another person's spouse.
I felt that George was sick, that he was tight in the way that he was. He couldn't have done anything else but Superman.
Despite the affair, Reeves was actually pretty faithful when he got involved with someone, at least until he found another serious connection. While he was still involved with Toni, he started sleeping with the much younger Lenore Lemon. Unlike Eastwood, Reeves was a bit better about making up his mind. He opted to break up with Toni and marry Lemon. Sadly, he didn't get to enjoy their wedding. He was found dead in his bed, having taken his own life. Paris-born actor and director Roman Polanski spent decades upon decades working on a vast filmography of celebrated movies, and for much of that time, he was a known rapist. In 1977, Polanski invited 13-year-old Samantha Geimer to model for the French edition of Vogue. During the second shoot, he gave her alcohol and Quaaludes, then sexually assaulted her. Following this despicable act, Polanski was arrested. But instead of confiscating his passport, authorities allowed him to travel to London, then France. He fled there because French law prevents its citizens from being extradited when accused of crimes overseas, a fact Polanski knew well. Less than 2 years later, he bragged about the crime to writer Martin Amis. He explained that the act was easy to get away with because he believed everyone, judges and jurors included, wanted to commit indecent acts with young girls. Sadly, just a few years after that conversation, Polanski then allegedly sexually assaulted Charlotte Lewis in his Paris apartment in 1983. He later denied these allegations in a 2019 interview, prompting Lewis to sue him for defamation. Sadly, none of these horrible acts kept Polanski from continuing to succeed. He received a standing ovation after winning the Best Director Oscar in 2003, and major figures like Harvey Weinstein, Woody Allen, and Martin Scorsese even petitioned against his extradition to the US. Comedian Jerry Lewis's humor might have brought a lot of people joy, but his family life was no laughing matter. He was regularly unfaithful to his wife Patty Palmer, and reportedly cut ties with his sons after adopting a daughter with his second wife. He even left them out of his will, writing, "I have intentionally excluded my sons and their descendants as beneficiaries of my estate, it being my intention that they shall receive no benefits hereunder." Though no one would be happy to hear that, his kids were not surprised by this decision. In fact, Lewis's biological children didn't have many good things to say about him at all. His youngest surviving son, Anthony, recalled to Inside Edition that his father was both physically and emotionally abusive.
My mom would get on the intercom and would say, "Your father's home," and we scattered.
When Anthony's brother Joe died from an overdose, Lewis refused to pay for the funeral because Joe had gone public about his father's physical abuse. He rarely answered his children's letters, and though he repeatedly expressed how badly he wanted a daughter when his sons were young, he later refused to acknowledge his daughter Susan, who was born of an affair. As recently as 2017, she was homeless. By his own admission, the Australian-born Errol Flynn was a scoundrel from a young age. As he wrote in his autobiography, "I have been in rebellion against God and government ever since I can remember." An icon of old Hollywood, he had quite a bad habit of womanizing. He got involved with a wealthy married woman named Madge Parks while he was engaged to another woman, and while he knew what he was doing was wrong, he explicitly said in his autobiography that he didn't care. And when he realized there was no future between him and Parks, he decided not to tell her. Instead, he just stole a bunch of her jewelry and ran away to Europe. He also went on a world tour with a Dutch doctor doing all kinds of seedy things. These days, cockfighting is frowned upon to say the least. But when they were in the Philippines, they did more than watch and bet. They actually rigged fights by poisoning rival roosters. Karma did come for Flynn eventually. When he got to Macau, Flynn got a taste of his own medicine when a woman got him high on opium at a casino and scammed him out of money. Unsurprisingly, Hollywood stardom didn't do much to change Flynn's ways. He got particularly into juvenile pranks, like stuffing Olivia de Havilland's underwear with a dead snake. She naturally developed a distaste for him after that, though Flynn claimed he was just trying to show her affection. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, help is available. Visit the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website or contact RAIN's National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE 4673.